You're listening to Health Unabashed on Healthcare Now Radio, a show that unapologetically explores the promising innovations, the leadership vision, and best practices to transform our siloed sick care system into one that embraces and promotes the health and well-being of people both domestically and around the globe. Hosted by digital health advocate, influencer, and author Gil Bash, the show explores the thought-provoking ideas, people, and companies who are making a difference. I'm your co-host, Greg Masters, and with Gil, we explore the insights and innovations of our guests on how to connect the dots to create sustainable change. Learn more about the show on the program page at healthcarenowradio.com. And with that introduction, Gil, over to you.
Greg, thank you so much for that gracious introduction and for being my partner on the program. By the way, everybody, listen to Greg and Fred Goldstein's program, Pop Health. It's a great program. I love it. It's dealing with the critical issues of our nation. And we're going to swing into speaking to our guests, doctors Jeff Gamble and Dr. Danish Nagda. They are doing something that I think we all have to pay very close attention to. I'm a very big believer, as many of you know, that our fragmented healthcare system makes it very difficult for people to deal with preventive health issues, to explore what is health and wellness, and sadly, when they're really in a bind, how to access the health system. We have people of all different ages. They wait in waiting rooms, even during the COVID period, much longer than is necessary. Now, we always say that the patient is at the center of the system. And I always say, what sort of system that puts the customer at the center and then tells them to wait until they're seen for 30 minutes, if they're lucky in some cases, go to another room and wait for another 10, 15 minutes if they're lucky. And then finally, a doctor whisks in, speaks to them for about 9 to 12 minutes and whisks out. The system is not working optimally for us as patients, as customers, as consumers of care. And Danish and Jeff have a whole different vision and approach to health that I want to explore today. So I want to start with a basic question for both of you. It's a complex question because I think we all agree that the health system isn't optimal. Maybe it's broken. And then often what we're trying to do is put Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids. We're trying to stick technology into a system where it may not fit well. It's retrofitted into the system. So I wanted to get your thoughts about your experiences, your life, what you're up to, but I want to start with a basic premise. And you guys jump in. Is the way to go about this not to fit technology into the health system, but maybe fit the health system into technology? Danish, Jeff, what's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, so as a physician who was trained in the legacy health system, went to Penn, was trained at WashU. These are your traditional legacy health system providers, but they're considered innovative in their own right. When you come from that world, it can be very difficult to imagine that something outside of this system can even exist. When you think about Resilient, what makes us very different than any of the other hybrid models, you have telehealth when appropriate, and then you have in-person when appropriate. But the difference there is that when you go in person, you see a doctor physically in person. When you go in person at a Resilient Cloud clinic, the doctor is actually still on the screen. But with the help of a nurse and connected devices, we've taken all the devices in the doctor's office and connected them to the internet. They're streaming to the doctor remotely. So what happens is that in real time, the doctor is actually able to see inside your eardrum or see your eardrum or listen to your heart in real time. But not only can the doctor hear it, but you as the patient can hear it. The doctor's actually explaining to you, hey, you see that little circle right there? That's your eardrum. And you hear the little lub and dub and a swishing sound between, that's your heartbeat. You've got a murmur. And you're having these like very intimate conversations. So it's very similar in some senses to the hybrid models. What makes us different actually is that you don't ever get to actually meet your doctor in person, but that trade-off allows you to be able to actually see your doctor at every location. So imagine at One Medical, no matter which location you went to, you would see your doctor there. That's what we're doing at Rezilient. So the idea is whether it's at home, on your computer, on your phone, or if you go to any of our cloud clinics, your doctor will see you there. It's all about continuity of care. And one of the challenges that you brought up is, do we help innovate or transform the current health system, or do we start redesigning the health system based on a new infrastructure? I can tell you, it was my experience of not my experience of being a doctor, but my experience of becoming a caregiver that gave me insight into this. And it was very clear that in the middle of a pandemic, as we're looking around ourselves, we're seeing the limitations of the legacy infrastructure. So to answer your question very directly, I am definitely in the boat of people that believe that building on top of a rotten foundation is not the future. And I believe that it's time to build the infrastructure from the ground up again.
Yeah, so I'm going to, Jeff and you are partners. You've known each other since university days at WashU. You on the medical side, Jeff on the neuroengineering side of this. Jeff, I wanted to swing over to you on that same question because Danish is looking at this from his sense of he was trained to fit into the system. You kind of grew up at the system at the breakfast table, I understand, and yet went into engineering and now went into certainly the medical or the bio side of engineering. Now you're in the medical system. You're seeing it from different eyes. Broken, not broken. Fix, not fix. Are you the new doctor? I mean, PhD engineer. Is Danish really is he like the focus group? Are you the doctor? Tell us.
I would love to say that MDs are the legacy. So no, but we love doctors here at Rezilient Health. No, I think that to your question, I actually look at it slightly different. I think as an engineer.
Are you going to have a job after this by looking at it?
I was going to say, here we go.
I know, Danish is part of the past.
Well, we build on the foundation, right? We build on the foundation of history.
I always joke with him that I'm always playing the long game. So But I think as an engineer, my answer to that question is that it really shouldn't be building towards the healthcare system, and it shouldn't be building towards the technology either. I think the real answer is what is the problem that the patient and the providers have today? What are the tool sets that are available to you today? And in solving that problem, if you can build something new out of those existing tool sets, then great, that's what you should do. And yes, you build new infrastructure from that.
I mean, you just brought up something that I don't think we talk about enough in society. We kind of look at the patient as should be the customer, but it's not really the customer. I mean, the system is the customer. Let's face it, right? The system is the beast, and the system kind of like devours itself and all of us. But you said something that I'm going to return it back to you. I wanted to highlight is maybe the people who are struggling here and really need rescue are in fact not the patient, but the patient and the provider. In other words, the physician. I can't believe Danish could say, "Oh, it was working for me great until I started to work with Jeff." But I can't believe it's working optimally for the physician either. I can't believe that they love the current system very much. So go back to what you were saying, but I just want you to keep my thought in mind as you're going forward.
No, definitely. And I think it's poignant that you highlight that. And it's something that Danish has taught me, honestly, over the years of working with him. When I got into healthcare as an engineer, you were kind of taught of, okay, what problems do patients have? Try to solve that thing. And it really wasn't until I got to work very closely with Danish and other colleagues of his that I realized, and I had kind of an eye-opening experience in that, oh, wow, they're having a tough time too. And this thing wasn't built for them either. And in the end, unless both sides are happy, care is going to suffer. And I think that's what we're seeing it right now in the midst of this pandemic. And I think we will continue to see it on the other end of this pandemic. If you are going to solve problems in healthcare, you have to be solving it for both the patient and for the clinician on the other side.
I'm listening to exactly what you said, what Danish, entered in, and I was reflecting on what our CDC director was doing. Obviously, there's been a lot of question or critique about how she's handled the messaging around COVID. I don't want to get into that. I actually have written a piece on that people can find on Medical Life, but I don't want to get into that there. But I think that we tend to think of messaging as monolithic, like I'm going to speak to everybody with this one message. And listening to you, Jeff, it just really struck home for me in terms of not just COVID, but in terms of how we access health. Some people coming out of this COVID era have sort of gotten used to, if it's not on Zoom, it's not happening. In other words, like telehealth or in some form, whether it's cloud-based technologies or telehealth, I'm very comfortable with it. I'm very comfortable having a relationship with someone virtually. I've only known you guys virtually, so I'm comfortable having a relationship with people virtually. I would be very comfortable having a meaningful, lasting relationship with a clinician virtually, because they're not artificial. They're not artificial intelligence being thrown at me. It's a real relationship. It's just virtual, and some people would never go for it. And what I hear a lot in the when I'm reading all the reports is it's either this or that. Like, we people want to see a doctor. People don't want to see a doctor. And maybe, and you guys jump in, maybe it's not the this or that at all. It's like, for some people, they want to sit in the waiting room. It's how they were brought up. It's their culture. That's how they want to go. And for some people, it's like, I don't want to drive to a doctor's office. I want it to be much more convenient for me. I do want to have a relationship. I do want the information. I just don't want to hang around all day to get it. I mean, what do you think about that? Do we have to build a health system that says at the core, the mission of health is to support your well-being, but your choice of how you get to supporting your well-being might be this, or this?
So I gotta push back a little, because you just made a very stark contrast between what of the world as it sits today, which is telehealth is incredibly convenient, but some people might not go for it, and in-person care is incredibly inconvenient, and some people are like, hey, this is what I like. I think going back to what Jeff was saying in terms of what problem are we trying to solve, we have to call a spade, which is telehealth is FaceTime today, right? And if you start claiming that a doctor can do everything they would do via FaceTime, you're calling doctors palm readers, and that's just not the case. There are things that we need to do. If I, as an ear, nose, throat doctor, don't look in your ear, nose, and throat, we've got some problems going here. There's going to be some issues with your care. And so, I think the hard part for us today is that, as we envision what's coming in the future, we're using sort of the systems of the past to design what's coming in the future. And instead, let's say, okay, what you just said is, I want to get to know somebody remotely. That's called continuity of care. So let's talk about that value. I want continuity of care. So not I press a button, different doctor shows up, but I press the button and my doctor shows up. So that's one element that we want. Another element that we want is that depending on what my need is, my doctor can cover and get the job done. They can get all the information they would want to get, and they want to be able to treat me. And the third big one is, it doesn't cost me an arm and a leg to do something like this. So it has to be accessible and affordable. So as we're thinking about this, which is, all of this, it means that telehealth has to evolve from what we imagine it today to be. And that's what's interesting is, you just mentioned that in-person care has to have a waiting room. Well, what if when you go in person, there is no waiting room? We just got rid of that entire problem. But when you get rid of that problem, you're creating 10 new problems, right? Like, how do you actually execute on that? What if telehealth was beyond just FaceTime? Okay, well, what does that look like? And that's what we're building at Rezilient, right? So, in our opinion, we think that healthcare of tomorrow is omni-channel. It's hybrid. It includes both telehealth. It actually includes everything from asynchronous, which is text messaging or even information that's available from before, adding to that synchronous telehealth or video and audio, and then adding to that things like cloud clinics and ultimately home visits, ultimately hospital at home. You're going to see this entire thing come together. Again, let's think infrastructure. Imagine the entire infrastructure being both digitally enabled, but also physical when needed. And I think that's what's exciting. That's what post-COVID will look like. So I wanted to push back a little bit on this dichotomy of what we're seeing now is telehealth, which is convenient, but not everybody's going for it. That's not what's going on. Doctors are standing up and saying, I can't do everything I can do completely remotely. You know why, Gil? Because before the pandemic, 90% of doctors hadn't even tried video with their patients. Now everybody's tried and said, okay, we're starting to put the guardrails on, hey, we can do this, but we can't do that. Like if you have a broken arm, Gil, I don't care how good you are on Zoom. I can't fix it.
I can't set my own arm?
No. And that's what I'm trying to say. Again, I don't care what the tech bros tell you. I don't care because they clearly have never taken care of a patient. And I think that's what's been interesting through this, which is we're seeing the evolution of two schools of thought right now. And you're going to come across this over and over.
Yeah, I can
text
see
messaging. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I can see why you and Jeff teamed up. It's, right. There's a combination of when vision has to connect to operation, and when you keep it as a vision, I always say vision becomes over time just a nice idea. If you can't operationalize it, it's not worth anything. And you can really see why you're sort of like co-leaders of a new movement. So starting from where you are, I love it. I hope that everybody sort of like grabs this part of the conversation and like puts it on their smartphones and listens to it daily. I want to go back to something we were talking about earlier, which is, sort of like, do you put technology into medicine or medicine into technology? And I don't think I'm going to even question my own question, which is almost like Doctor Who in the TARDIS now. is how do you bring it? How do you sort of say it's not this or that? It's something else altogether, which is we have to reinvent a standalone side by side to the traditional system model, because it sounds like from your experience in the last 2 years, there's a new world of medicine that's evolving, which is a very progressive minded physician and system who says, when I don't need to have you yanked in front of me, I won't. And when I do, I do. And when I need to be in contact with you because you really want to have a relationship, we can. And when you don't need that, we won't. And so I want to ask you both now the two thorny questions, which is, just as Danish, you were trained as a physician, as an ENT, on the old model you experienced from being a caregiver. And by the way, I did want to mention my sympathy to you and your family on the recent loss of your father. Let's dedicate this segment of the program to his memory. I know he would be beyond proud of you for your caring and your pioneering work. I know Jeff, as a friend, would share in that. But I wanted to ask you both the two thorny questions. I'm going to separate them. One, reinvent, create a system that's harmonious with the cultural evolution that clinicians have undergone during the past few years. I didn't use telehealth before. I barely texted you. Now I have. Now I do. I'm comfortable with that. Okay. Evolution of a culture. I got it. Payers. Payers, I find economically, or for some reason, they should want it to be more efficient for the beneficiary, for the customer, for the patient. And yet, for some reason, payers, they're also stuck in the mud. They sort of say, well, it's not as time intensive. I don't want to reimburse you as much for a telehealth session as I would for an in-person session. And so economically, the doctor who's comfortable says, well, I guess, why don't you all wait in the waiting room? because I get reimbursed more for that. I'm not saying doctors are economically incentivized, but doctors have to earn a living too. How does the system, this fragmented health ecosystem, how does the system accommodate innovation that just improves care and the system itself?
Yeah, I mean, but you can do things like what we're doing, which is working directly with employers who are self-funded. So they have their own insurance plans, their own health plans, right? So they use carriers, they work with carriers, like the big insurance companies, but they also, the buck stops with them, right? They understand. And the other big thing about employers that makes them very interesting is that when their employee is sitting in a waiting room, that's affecting their bottom line. That's absenteeism costs, and so, or when their employee, it takes them 3 months to get a primary care doctor, that affects their bottom line because of delay of diagnosis and delay of treatment, which then ultimately can lead to emergency room visits and all these kinds of downstream costs. And so, when we thought about who is the person to work closely with, we actually did think a one type of payer, which is the employer, was the right place to start because they were more open-minded. And I will tell you that my colleagues, the legacy health systems, when you would talk to them about, omni-channel care, multi-channels, right channel for the right need and seamlessly connecting it, they would laugh and they would say, I can't get my doctors to FaceTime. And so, I think the payers actually have been the most open-minded in terms of this, like you said, and they should be even more than they are right now. I will say I'm seeing this change occur, but what we're going to see is many people are going to try many different things. And we're seeing it right now. Everybody is trying to build walled gardens. You're seeing all of the payers trying to build their own platforms. They're trying to, nickel and dime on those things. And I think what we're going to find is that patients don't want that. If you change your payer, you have to change your primary care doctor. That's not ideal. And so I think we're going to see a lot of this happen. But what we're seeing right now is the infrastructure itself being changed, and that will include the payer. We're seeing that payers are being forced by regulations and compliance. We have multiple states, Gil, now that require payers to pay parity to in-office visits. That's already going on right now. I can tell you 5 years from now, it will be a 50-state requirement. We're seeing all of these things happen.
You're really mapping out practically what's going to happen in the very near future. We've been talking a lot about technology, health, fragmentation, economics. Jeff, I'd like to get your read on something. Where in building a system, we have such magnificent technology. I remember being CEO of a large company, sort of $1 billion in billings, and arguing with the parent company about giving staff computers. This is in the late 1990s, and people's attitude was computers are for secretaries, people who think and do work. They don't need computers. And partially it was because we didn't have good use of data from the internet. I mean, that they didn't see the functionality. They saw it as a expensive typewriter. So technology changes everything, right? Technologies change the way we work, the way we think, the way we access each other. And health, to some extent, is kind of a beeper-based model. To some extent, I mean, I know doctors who still use beepers. We even, in terms of biotelemetry, I know doctors are using Holter monitors instead of sort of patches that pick up the same thing. I mean, it's their comfort zone. So essentially you're a technology wizard, but that understands science and technology and engineering. What do you think we want to look for? Danish mapped out what the structure economically could look like in another few years. Let me rein you back, not go 5 years. How about give me 2 years from now, from a technological standpoint? What tools do you envision we're going to be playing with 2 years from now? Tell me about cloud-based technologies you think. Tell me about what the platform is going to look like.
Well, I think, touching on a point that you made earlier, that because a lot of technology development and adoption has been driven by what is kind of a broken legacy system, what you've ended up with thus far are a lot of fragmented technological solutions that haven't had a lot of adoption. Whereas had they had been built on something that was seamless across the board and omni-channel from the beginning, it would actually open up new markets. So for example, connected devices. Connected device adoption has actually been horrid in the legacy healthcare system. Even though USB-enabled medical devices have been around for, a decade plus, one of the things that we're thinking about is, well, if you kind of start from the beginning and build the infrastructure from the ground up to allow for this idea of digital touch points for whether it's messaging, video, cloud clinics, et cetera, and you start to incorporate some of these technologies like connected devices into that, now adoption becomes ubiquitous as that technology stack gets used, and it actually creates new markets, right? So one of the things that we're really interested in is this idea that, well, if you have a digital infrastructure, now every encounter gets captured.
Now we're going to hold this for a second, Jeff, because you've just given me a big idea. First of all, I want to thank both of you. You're amazing. You're both amazing. And what I love about what you and your colleagues are doing is it's vision realized now. And that's what makes it special. I know, by the way, I want to acknowledge you. You've had a lot of success. I read the piece about your company in Fast Company. Congratulations on the grant from Melinda Gates. I thought that was tremendous. Obviously, that's a form of due diligence. So again, thumbs up on that. I sort of see this as like the post Shark Tank visit. I've got to have you both back a year from now for like a short mini segment with some other people I've had the honor of speaking with and saying, where are you right now? Because I'm really excited about where you're going. I want to just say, you got to keep pressing forward. It's not enough to say that the system isn't optimal. We all agreed to that during the program and even before the program. But you've shed some light and some hope on building a system and infrastructure that actually puts all of us, doctors, patients, payers, employers, policymakers, all of us can be customers together. All of us can be satisfied. We just have to use both the experience and desire of physicians to heal and the value of technology to be deployed to help us. I want to thank you so much. And of course, my co-host, Greg Masters, for being with us today on Health UnaBASHed.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
And that's a wrap for today's broadcast. We want to thank our listeners for taking the time to tune in. You can learn more about Health UnaBASHed on the program page at healthcarenowradio.com. We stream live weekdays at 2:30 a.m., 10:30 a.m., and 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Or for you left coasters, 11:30 p.m., 7:30 a.m., or 3:30 p.m. Pacific. For previous on-demand episodes, check out the Health UnaBASHed show page at healthcarenowradio.com. Let's keep the conversation going on Twitter by connecting with Gil_Bash, and that's B-A-S-H-E, and Greg Masters, M-P-H, and that's Greg with 2 G's, or via the show hashtag HealthUnaBASHed. And for on-demand listeners, please consider liking and subscribing to our show on the podcast platform of your choice. Until next time, stay unapologetically passionate about improving health.